In those cases, I do ingest caffeine just prior to those. And most people, not all people that try that waking up, in that case, maybe just push out your caffeine intake by about 15 minutes, and that will extend the arc of that caffeine effect. First off, let me say that if you are somebody who likes to wake up and do very intense exercise within the first 90 minutes after waking, well, in that case, it would be appropriate to ingest your caffeine just prior to doing that exercise. Not a problem. Not a problem. But you should expect that the combination of drinking caffeine very shortly after waking plus exercising very intensely shortly after waking will increase the intensity of that early afternoon and afternoon fatigue that you feel. Now, for some people, that's a great thing. They can afford to take a nap or do non-sleep deep rest, step away from work and so forth. In that case, I strongly encourage you to do whatever it is that allows you to get regular exercise, because regular exercise is going to be very beneficial. In fact, we did an entire episode called Toolkit for Fitness that describes a couple of different, but really one main structure that allows you to get the appropriate amount of resistance training and cardiovascular training and flexibility training throughout the week. I happen to follow that program, and it works very well, and it does involve some of those workouts to come very early in the morning, shortly after waking, and in those cases, I do ingest caffeine just prior to those, so within 10, 20 minutes of waking. However, on other days, I personally delay my caffeine intake 90 to 120 minutes, and I've done that to great benefit. And most people, if not all people that try that, have reported the same. I should mention that some people will find getting out to that 90 minutes to be excruciatingly difficult because they're so accustomed to ingesting caffeine close to waking up. In that case, maybe just push out your caffeine intake by about 15 minutes each day until you hit that 90 to 120 minute mark. And that will make it much easier. It might take you a week or so to get there, but once you get there, you'll find it to be quite easy to maintain. The other thing is that if you are somebody who insists on drinking caffeine very shortly after waking, I would encourage you to drink half of your caffeine then, and then the other half of your caffeine about an hour later. That also will help offset some of the afternoon crash for reasons related to the so-called kinetics of caffeine. Caffeine has a quarter life of about 12 hours. That means that if you were to ingest a cup of coffee at, let's say 8 a.m., and let's say 100 milligram coffee, just for sake of simplicity, that about 25% of that caffeine action, we wouldn't really say 25 milligrams, but about 25% of that caffeine action will still be present at 8 p.m. that night, which is pretty remarkable. So there's a long arc of caffeine effects, and this is why it can impede sleep if we take caffeine in the afternoon. But again, if you're somebody who wakes up and you really need caffeine right away and you refuse to do this 90 to 120 minute delay thing that I'm talking about, well, then in that case, I would drink half of your caffeine upon waking and then a little bit more or the other half about an hour later, and that will extend the arc of that caffeine effects such that you don't need it again in the afternoon because you won't experience the afternoon crash. Because of the way caffeine works, I should mention that if you ingest caffeine on an empty stomach, it will have a more potent stimulant effect. That will also tend to increase the level of jitteriness that caffeine can produce. Later, I'll talk about ways to offset.